Welcome back to my vessel of light. Tonight we begin with a confession shaped like time. A broken watch began to tell the truth, and a life changed because minutes finally learned how to listen. Iris Mendez found the watch in a small velvet pouch inside a box of her grandfather's things. The leather strap was weathered, the crystal scuffed. The second hand paused at 19 with patient stubbornness. The crown turned but refused to wind. The hand stayed fixed at 3:18, a time that meant nothing to her yet felt deliberate, like a door left open exactly the width of one decision. She planned to keep it as a keepsake, nothing more. But the first morning she wore it, the bus she meant to catch left early, she missed it by the precise space of one glance. Annoyed, she walked instead, turning corners slowly, and past an intersection the bus would have crossed. An ambulance wailed through as traffic froze. Timing rescued strangers while she counted breaths and felt a strange gratitude arrive. At work, she set the watch on her desk, the frozen minute hand pointing like a quiet instruction. She noticed her pace soften, her email sounded kinder, and her shoulders remembered how to lower without permission forms. That evening she searched 3:18 and found only a verse about wisdom and a map coordinate in the ocean. Nothing useful, still the time felt familiar, as if the day had been secretly tuned around it. The next day she met Jonah on the elevator, an acquaintance who smiled like a lighthouse. He asked about the old watch. She said it was broken. He said sometimes stop things keep better time than the speed we choose. Lunch ended late. Iris hurried toward the subway, but the watch insisted on 3:18, a meaningless number until a violin began in the corridor. A busker played a melody her grandfather used to hum while shaving. She stood still until the song ended. Tears arrived and left without apology. She dropped a note into the case and felt the day align, not perfectly, accurately, the way maps agree with feet after doubt finally rests. Over the week, small alignments collected quietly. She left a minute later and avoided a downpour. She left a minute earlier and met an opening elevator. Her steps found people exactly when conversation needed a landing more than a performance. One afternoon, the watch fogged slightly from rain. She wiped the crystal and noticed the minute hand move the smallest width forward. Not to a new minute, only the hint of willingness. She laughed at herself and kept walking. A bookshop on Mercer displayed a sign about a visiting horologist repairing heirlooms. Iris entered on a whim. The room smelled like cedar and soft paper. The horologist, a woman named Sora, came, wore magnifiers like gentle armor. Sora examined the watch and nodded with affection. Movement is tired yet honest. Balance wheel leans, mainspring remembers too much. She suggested a minimal service. Iris agreed, then hesitated. Please do not reset the time, keep 3:18 exactly. Sora smiled knowingly. Some times are less about measurement and more about belonging. She said the watch would keep its truth. As she worked, Iris watched tiny gears breathe. She felt respect growing for this quiet machine and for her mornings. When Sora finished, the second hand did not start. By design, the watch stayed still yet somehow clearer. Iris thanked her and stepped outside. The street felt newly tuned, not safer, simply easier to read without rushing. She set a small practice. Glance at the watch when a decision appears. Pause 3 breaths, then choose. The ritual turned crowded minutes into sentences with punctuation. Silence became part of the grammar, and timing became less theatrical and more faithful. On Tuesday, she received a message from an old friend named Layla. Meet me at the Riverside Coffee at 3:30. Iris smiled at the near miss and replied yes. Then she arrived early and watched light gather on the water. A child nearby asked her mother what time it was. The mother said almost 3:18 without checking. Iris looked up startled and laughed softly. Serendipity can be playful. The watch face reflected the river and felt exactly right in her palm. Layla arrived with 2 coffees and a folder of travel photographs. They spoke of ordinary things with extraordinary care. Layla said she'd been reconsidering everything and needed a companion for a slower map. Iris said she could learn that speed. When Iris left, a cyclist swerved and nearly clipped her. A stranger grabbed her elbow gently and studied her. He apologized with kindness and introduced himself as Mateo, a paramedic who trusts reminders more than alarms in his own pockets. They exchanged a few sentences shaped like relief, then parted. Later that evening, Iris realized the timing of the near collision had placed her exactly where her name would be heard kindly by someone who needed to hear it more than once. The city kept practicing its choreography. Trains arrived when conversations finished. Doors opened after apologies landed. Calendar blocks loosened into breathable afternoons. Iris wrote 3 lines in a notebook. Walk slower, answer gently. Let time tell me what it needs. On Saturday, she visited the small museum on Orchard where volunteers cataloged donations. A display described maritime signals and ship chronometers. Sailors once corrected their clocks using a noon cannon. Precision mattered because lives depended on honest noon. She stood before a brass chronometer that crossed oceans and felt the same steadiness as when the busker played. She understood that her small life needed accurate noon as much as ships, not accurate seconds, accurate belonging. Outside, rain started with theatrical intention. Iris stepped under an awning and saw Mateo again. He laughed at the returning weather and, at the coincidence, they shared shelter and stories. The rain sounded less like trouble and more like metronome practice. They walked 2 blocks together, parted at the corner, and promised nothing. Promises no longer needed choreography. They needed the right time that admitted both people as they were, not as they performed when anxious. That night, Iris dreamed of her grandfather adjusting a clock. He did not force the hands. He waited. He listened to the room's breathing, then moved the minute hand just enough to meet reality without bruising it. Morning brought a call from her mother asking for help clearing the old storage unit before the lease ended. Iris arrived with boxes and patience. They laughed at forgotten decorations and sat on cool concrete when the dust asked for a pause. At the bottom of a trunk, they found a postcard addressed to Iris in her grandfather's script. It had never been mailed. It read in simple words, "When you lose your place, wait for true time to find you again." She pressed the card to her chest and felt something accurate click inside, like a gear settling into teeth. Her mother rested a hand on her shoulder. The room kept breathable silence longer than their old rhythms would allow. Later, Iris noticed the watch's minute hand had moved a half mark forward, still pointing to 3:18 with the courtesy of a bow rather than a lock. She smiled and whispered thank you without requiring an audience. The next week brought a small crisis at work. A project deadline collided with a colleague's emergency. Schedules snarled and tempers rose. Iris placed the watch on the table and asked the room for 3 breaths before any plan or blame. They paused, then rearranged tasks with calm accuracy. The day ended earlier than expected because attention had learned to listen. After a teammate said your still watch reminded me to stop sprinting in a hallway, Iris said that was its real job. On a cold evening, she met Layla and Mateo for soup. They measured recipes by feel rather than grams. Laughter found the right gaps between spoons and stories. The watch sat beside the bowls, its stillness anchoring human minutes without demanding control. Synchronicity no longer surprised her, it educated her. The watch did not predict, it aligned. It taught her to release the argument between hurry and belonging. It suggested that truth keeps time differently than alarms trained by panic. One morning, the busker returned to the station and played the same melody. Iris placed the postcard inside the violin case and said a silent blessing for anyone who needed to arrive at a kinder noon today. That afternoon, a stranger asked Iris for directions. The conversation lasted exactly the width of a green light, long enough to help without pretension, short enough to protect everyone's schedule. The watch felt satisfied even without a second hand moving. She started writing one sentence at the end of each day, a record of timing instead of achievements. Today the elevator opened when breath settled. Today the call arrived after tea. Today the apology landed before midnight and changed tomorrow's weather. As weeks gathered, the minute hand edged forward a little more, not to a new minute, simply toward readiness. Iris understood the face would move when she no longer needed its stillness to correct her pace. One evening, she returned to Sora for a strap replacement. Sora asked whether the watch behaved. Iris said yes, better than any schedule. Sora polished the crystal and said honest time feels like a door opening rather than a bell shouting. On the way home, Iris passed the intersection where she had missed the bus weeks earlier. The memory felt like a hinge rather than a regret. She crossed with ordinary grace and waved at nothing in particular, knowing the wave belonged to everything. A storm rolled in and the electricity flickered. Neighbors gathered in the hallway with candles and patient conversation. Iris realized the community shared a watch whenever power slipped. Stories replaced seconds and safety replaced speed. Later that night, the power returned, her phone filled with delayed notifications. She placed it face down and lifted the watch to her ear. No ticking, yet the silence sounded like a choir without notes, anchored and present. The following morning she wrote, "Time that is true never begs, it invites." She wore the watch to the river path and matched her footsteps to her breathing. 3 counts to arrive, 3 counts to belong, the current approved. Mateo joined her at the water without schedule. Synchronicity had adopted them gently. They walked without comparing calendars. And when they parted, nothing felt stolen. Everything felt timely, which is another word for kind. When Iris reached home, she finally saw it. The minute hand had moved to 3:19. She laughed aloud. Not because the watch was fixed, because she was, or at least she trusted the hinge more than the rush. She placed the watch on the windowsill and let afternoon light warm the leather strap. Then she made tea, texted her mother a photograph of the postcard framed, and wrote tomorrow's sentence in advance. Walk slowly and answer on the second ring. If a broken measure in your life begins telling the truth, consider letting it. Set down the argument with speed. Practice 3 considerate breaths at each small choice, then watch the day reveal alignments you did not have to chase. Thank you for being here with my vessel of light. If this story kept you company, like the video so the candle travels farther. Subscribe to my vessel of light and share one moment when timing felt like kindness in your week.